Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chairs. I think just picking up from where Honorable Ndai left, it came from you that indeed some of the officers have been partisan, particularly during elections. But even in the recent demonstrations, maandamano, it was very, very clear that some of the officers are partisan. You could see officers saying, we have allowed these demonstrations to go on, we have banned those demonstrations, we will not allow those demonstrations. And Article 37 of our Constitution is very clear. That right, the freedom to demonstrate, the freedom to protest, to picket, is guaranteed by our Constitution. It does not depend on the generosity of bunge in Nairobi or IG Kome. But you could see these officers actually purporting to allow or disallow. And some demonstrations were very violently handled. Some of us in this dialogue committee were victims. Some of us lost very close friends. Some of us lost our bodyguards, who are actually not just brutalized, injured, but some were shot and killed by police officers. And you could tell that that partisanship was very evident. They couldn't allow demonstrations here in Nairobi, but when we have issues of some money being stolen for students going to Finland, demonstrations were allowed in Eldoret. When there would be tea machines in Kericho being brought and the citizens came out to demonstrate, demonstrations were allowed. But in Kisumu, in certain parts of Western, in Nairobi, the violence, the brutality of the police was shocking. Now that you yourselves admit this partisanship, we want to hear from you. What have you done to address this issue? Because it's a growing menace to enjoyment of fundamental rights and freedoms in our Constitution, particularly Article 37. And it also goes against what you have yourselves told us in Article 244 that requires the highest standards of professionalism and discipline in our officers. Partisanship shows lack of professionalism. It also shows probably the lack of proper training, because you have said one of the issues there you look at is the training of our officers under Article 244D to the highest, in fact, not high standards, the highest standards of competence, integrity, respect for human rights, and fundamental freedoms and dignity. So these are issues we would like you to address us on. But having witnessed firsthand the brutality and abuse of human rights by our police officers, I want to ask you if you are aware that we have about 1,000 police officers from Kenya who will be dispatched to Haiti, and there's an uproar internationally because of the recent abuse of human rights by our police. The world is worried that these police officers who abuse human rights here in Kenya might export that police brutality, abuse of human rights in Haiti and on the international stage where they are now being sent. Are you aware that this decision has been made? Will IPOB be involved, or have you been prepared to extend that oversight to our officers who will be going to Haiti if they are going to export the same police brutality outside our borders, which will reflect very seriously on our image internationally. We want you to address us on that, because what we know or what we've heard about Haiti, they are not the stone-throwing demonstrations that maybe you might have been told about. These are gangs that are heavily armed. These are gangs that have killed their own leaders. And we are sending our young people in uniform, in harm's way, to face these gangs. Many of them may not come back alive. Are you aware of this development? Will you be oversighting this? We would like you to address us on that. Lastly, you have said you received over 437 complaints. I think that was from the last elections. Would like to know how many have you concluded, which ones are still how many are still under investigations out of those 437. Would also like to know, in the post-election period, that is in the maandamano period, how many complaints have you received? And in the face of the serious police brutality witnessed in this country, and I want to confirm what the Honorable Pio and I have said, because as principals of Azimio, we have been working with these families, we have buried their dead, we have visited hospitals, and we have witnessed firsthand that those 73 Kenyans, many of them were very young, between 18 and 25, the oldest was about 30. Post-mortem reports were availed to us, showing they were shot by the police, and the cause of death were gunshot wounds, many of them to the backs of their heads, many of them in their backs. We would like you to tell us whether you have received these complaints, whether you have visited some of these mortuaries in Kisumu and other parts of this country, in Nairobi, and whether you are aware of these killings by a special unit of our police. We would like you to confirm that, whether you are aware of a team of police in Subarus that are called Special Support Units, SSU, and whether you are also, as per your mandate, oversighting this killer squad of a special police unit. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Eugene and I today decided we are the people who speak the longest, so we manage you as you manage me. Obilianka?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll be rather brief compared to the previous speaker. I'm normally brief. I'll go straight onto the 2/3 gender rule and your input as IPOA. First of all, I want to appreciate that you have made your presentations very clearly on that. But again, underscore the fact that you are actually, the police force is really suffering from the 2/3 gender balance. Looking at the numbers you have mentioned, 10,000, 14,000 against the 200,000 or how many thousands of police. What have you done as a sector? Or what do you recommend in order to cover up this? I have seen during recruitments the bias that is there, especially on the girl child. It's like you allocate very few numbers for the girls, and yet they have equal opportunity in this country. Why hasn't it actually brought up a formula? Like we are trying to sit here and bring up a formula on how to cater for the 2/3 gender rule, and let it also flow across the police, especially on the girl child. Secondly, you also mentioned on something on the professionalism, I think of the IPOA board or IPOA, whatever, generally. You said 3/4 of the composition is actually officers. Why haven't you not put up a recommendation on other professionals to be included?
The National Police Service.
The National Police
Service Commission.
Service Commission to be included apart from just officers and maybe the few other professionals that you have. Why can't we have a scenario where you cut across all sections? We have the professionals like the lawyers, even teachers, stuff like that. And finally, I get back to the demonstrations. During the demonstrations, people's properties were destroyed, businesses were devastated, and the police did very little actually to protect these groups. I can't say it was only in Azimio regions. Everybody was affected across the board. Kenya Kwanza sections were affected. Azimio regions were affected. So generally, what did you do, or what do you recommend that can be done? Or have you done even anything about it in the first place? Thank you.
Amina.
Thank you, Chair. My first question will be on the statements that were made by the Inspector General, Koome. He denied about the police brutality during the protests. He even went ahead to assert that Azimio La Umoja is hiring dead bodies and trying to paint a bad picture to the government and towards the police force. So as IPOA, did you investigate into this matter? Did you find out whether these people were dead? Were they really hired? Or were they really killed? So what's your take on that? Question number 2, we have also noticed as Kenyans that there is the raiding and sometimes kidnapping of certain high-profile individuals in broad daylight. IPOA, do you have anything to say about that? Thank you.
And now to just make my comments. But one of the reasons I really want IPOA to work is, you remember I was a commissioner in KCHR. And I remember walking into the late Saitoti's office and asking him to ensure that there's a policing oversight authority. In fact, this bill, the draft came actually from the Commission on Human Rights. I used to do policing oversight within the security sector reforms program. And I realized the scale and magnitude. So my first question to you, Anne, 10 years on, what are the deficiencies? Because definitely there are deficiencies, particularly within the Act. The anchorage in law or in the Constitution is one. We try to find place for IPOA within Article 59 of the Constitution so that we can create, upload, because it says that through that you can create more than one commission. But I think we were not able to necessarily locate it within the Article 59 commissions. I do agree, but what else do you think needs to be done in terms of legal reforms of the IPOA Act to upscale it to that extent where it is effective? 2, the president came on the promise that there will be no extrajudicial killings. And I do still believe that that is the position. The justification would only be what is contained in the National Police Act on the use of force as measurable and directly proportional to the loss of the lives of others. So I do hope you will respond to some of those queries by Opio on the basis that responds to the realm of the law, rule of law. I do not think the Kenya Kwanza government is in any way in support of an errant police force, a rogue police, or a regime police. But the second last question, the whole idea of police reforms, and you're supposed to be the police auditor. You're like an audit firm for the police, not only in terms of its accountability, but in terms of tracking its reforms, unless that mandate is not assumed in that act. The whole idea about police reforms was to move us away from a regime police to a democratic policing service? In your assessment, I can see very eminent people here, lawyers, doctors, social scientists. What do you think, how much progress would you say we have made from the advent of the 2010 Constitution to move ourselves away from a regime police to a policing service? And in that event, what more is required in terms of legislative, structural, or policy reforms? And lastly, the whole idea of also these shifts, there was the whole idea of police reforms or security sector reforms was premised on the fact that we needed to move away from the securitization of our democracy, that paradigm, to the democratization of our security. We move away from the securitization of our democracy, kwamba kila kitu ni serikali, matter of national security. In fact, there was a Director General of the INIS who tried to insert a clause to limit the Bill of Rights to national security. We discovered it at some point. So, at that time when we were voting the 2010 Constitution. So, in other words, human rights is not limited in the purview solely of national security. There are limitations that are created by the Constitution itself. So we wanted to move ourselves to the democratization of our security. The democratization of our security means people should be engaged more engaged in participation of our security apparatus. So the question will be, do you think this police service is doing enough in terms of democratization of our security outside these conventional things of nyumba kumi sijui and vitu kama hizo, or DCs and DOs and chiefs and whatnot? Is there been sufficient shift in terms of the paradigm? But finally to Opio and I think we will really expect an independent report from your team, and you can be very sure that there is no government that is not limited by the rule of law, and there's no government, the Kenya Kwanza government is not keen or is not intent on protecting where rogue police officers have been involved in taking the lives of others in a manner brutal. So therefore it should not be purported by their sentiments that there is any sanitization on our part. If you do your job, then I'm quite sure actions will be taken. But my last comment, I do not agree with giving you prosecutorial powers. There must be separation of powers. That's why we wanted the police to investigate, the DPP to prosecute. So you must continue to investigate, let another arm prosecute.
Quickly, please respond.
Okay.
Yes.
Chairman, I'll try to Chair, you raised this question, what has IPOA done within its mandate, whether we've been able to hold police to account, and what have we done in terms of command responsibilities. I would say that IPOA has done a lot. Probably one of our deficiencies is not going too much to the media. But in terms of accountability, we've done a lot. We've done many recommendations. We've completed record investigations within the time of our lifespan as the board that is continuing. And indeed, we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. Here we are being told we haven't done enough. You talk to the police officers, they don't want to see us. They say we are the worst team that ever came into being. We've increased the number of files that are with the DPP. We found about 60 files in courts. We've moved that number to 170. We have over 380 files lying at the DPP. And in total, we've forwarded over 500 files to the DPP. So a lot has been done. We've engaged DPP to try and see how that process can move faster. And at one point during the former DPP, he established a human rights desk to help review those files. And there are 2 points to it. One could be those that we have recommended prosecution. so that they make progress, and could be those that are pending and the officers need to be exonerated and the cases are still pending. So it cuts both ways. When these files are not attended quickly, there are those officers who are suffering, their files are still pending. And also there are those Kenyans whose files need to be prosecuted and the files are pending. It's work in progress. There are many reasons that have been given for this, including the fact that DPP, of course, receives files from many people, and those files are handled against the capacity that that office has. In terms of command responsibility, we've tried. We have the Mpesa case, which was initially done public inquest, and the judiciary recommended prosecution of very many officers. It was brought back to DPP. We supported DPP in investigating that case, and our conclusion was that there must be command responsibility. Again, that file is still sitting with the DPP. But our recommendation is that there has to be an element of command responsibility in certain matters. Baby Pendo is a good case. There is a case we call Nambale that was withdrawn without further consultation to us, where we had made recommendation for command responsibility. Again, that office does not report to us in terms of oversight. So when cases are withdrawn, the law allows them to do that. There is nothing much we can do. But in terms of IPOA position, there are instances where there is need for command responsibility. In terms of the next question that the chairman asked was deaths and injuries arising out of the demonstrations. The report that we shall be submitting has that data. In summary, we received 237 complaints involving 359 complainants. That is the period.
You say the report you're submitting now or when?
No.
The report you shall be submitting has got that data.
Yes, the one that you have directed that we sent through the email.
Okay.
Has that data.
And is it for election or post-election period?
CEO will be speaking into that, but it's also available. That data is also available. In terms of demonstrations, we received 237 during this period, between Sabasaba and the time there was ceasefire when this team was established. We received 237 complaints involving 359 complainants. Deaths that we received as IPOA are 57 that are under active investigation. Some of them are the tail heads. Deaths that we have captured, deaths, V4.
Of death?
Yes. Within the period of demonstration.
That you confirmed?
That the reports that IPOA has. The data that we have on deaths is 57.
Not 73.
Not 73. And this is how they are classified. Kisumu 33, Nakuru 2,
Slowly.
Nairobi 20.
Come again?
They are all under investigation, but Kisumu we had 33, Nakuru 2, Nairobi 20, Kakamega 2. Injuries were a number of them, and all that data is in this report that we shall be submitting to the committee. In terms of extrajudicial killings and the ability to institute private prosecution, I think Honorable Omar has already spoken into that. We've been seeking prosecutorial powers because you are a government entity, and you have had the position of the crafters of these documents. The position is that there should be separation of powers, and therefore, as a government entity, unless this team gives us prosecutorial powers, the law ties us to make recommendations to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution.
So are you saying the law is such that it constrains you from undertaking private prosecution?
Yes.
Explicitly?
We cannot do private because you're government. We are a government entity.
Under what law?
IPOA Act.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you. Is it explicit in the Act that you can't undertake private prosecution? And if you juxtapose that with the provisions of Article 157, let's help us understand. Yeah.
Chair, IPOA can do private prosecutions. What we are saying is that when we do our investigations and need to give recommendations to the ODPP, we have to wait until the ODPP now either agrees with our recommendations or returns the file to us to ask us to add on the evidence that he thinks perhaps does not meet the threshold. And during that process, because sometimes we finish our investigations very quickly, most of the investigations are over. But as you have heard from the figures, the files that are pending before the ODPP are too many. And we continue doing our investigations and forwarding our recommendations there. That's why we were asking for prosecutorial powers.
So, Waiganjo?
Yes.
Some of those files can stay there forever?
Yes.
In theory?
Sometimes in theory, they will stay there forever. Sometimes when they go to court, they'll be withdrawn without reference to the independent policing.
Can you do us a favor, Waiganjo? Can you give us an analysis of the files that you have taken to the DPP,
certainly,
those that have been prosecuted and those that are still pending?
That will be done right away, Chair. We have our CEO here who is in charge of the Secretariat, and we will give out those figures. But on to the matter that was also brought forth on the extrajudicial killings, we would also want this committee to take extrajudicial killings in law now legislatively from Manda. Yeah, Manda extrajudicial killing. We want a demarcation in law because we talk about extrajudicial killings and there is also Manda. So we want a clarity in that, and that can only be found in law. And then on abductions, we want a clear reference between abduction and enforced disappearance. Because the law is broad. We do not have a clear-cut law. When you say, because you cannot, sometimes there's an abduction and then you reappear. So you had disappeared, but you have appeared. So we are not clear on when are you abducted or when there is an enforced disappearance. The president also assured us that we would be carrying out an inquiry on enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killing. So we want that to come forth so that the citizens can come and give their stories. Because the files are many, we've post-mortem reports, we have a challenge of witnesses coming to us because also the witness protection program does not have sufficient budget to cover our witnesses. We have lost witnesses clearly when we have good cases. So those are some of the challenges we have. And I want to leave it now so that you can get the actual figures from our CEO.
Salake. Yeah, the CEO, unless otherwise.
I don't want to repeat what has already been spoken to, but probably just to clarify on the issue of the command responsibility, that as IPOA for the first time, innovatively together with the DPP, we've been able to take a case to court. Actually, the Bipendo case is a case in court where 12 senior police officers from county commanders are now in court. And that is by way of us taking the responsibility higher, beyond the constables on the ground. So this is a live matter which is currently in court, and we will be able to see the progression of that case in court. I don't know, Chair, you may wish to speak to the Haiti question. I'll leave that to the Chair. On the issue of extrajudicial killings, we have, of course, what has been explained by Honorable Waiganjo, but beyond that, as an authority, we have clarity on what we are doing. The cases we are able to investigate where it has been determined through investigations that we are able to identify the people responsible in those enforced disappearance or in extrajudicial killing have been taken through investigations. However, where we are not able to determine directly the police involvement, the commission or the authority has decided that it will undertake public inquiry. which will be able to, to determine exactly the circumstances and also determine accountability. So I think that is all I would want to clarify.
You are still on the floor.
Yes.
What about the other, you see, when you stretch your imagination in terms of the electoral injustices?
Yes.
There were complaints here by IBC.
Yes.
The officers were assaulted, murdered, etc., etc.
Yes.
There's been little police action. Can you please also look into why there's police inaction on complaints filed by IBC commissioners and the commission itself on part of the abductions, murder, assault, and other vestiges against the law? Secondly, I remember there are these men who are working in the KK Secretariat, the Indian nationals, who were actually abducted by the DCI and were killed in some container. They had a killing container somewhere. What is the extent of the fate of those men from the DCI?
Okay, maybe picking up on the last one about the Indians. I think this is a matter, again, which is, of course, in court. And between IPOA and the DCI, we were able to make a presentation. And I think I would rather ask the head of legal to speak to that matter with clarity.
Yes, thank you. As the CEO has stated that the matter is currently in court, the matter is being handled by, of course, IPOA and also the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service is dealing with that investigation, and the matter is currently in court.
On the issue of IBC, yes, there were the reports, of course, cases we are handling where IBC officers were assaulted, allegedly by police. A case we are handling is the case of the IBC officer in Wajir, and we have made a very advanced investigation on this, and these are matters which are basically towards conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the issue of partisan approach and the IG banning demonstrations, I'll ask the Vice Chair to speak into that. Then Commissioner Mutahi can speak into the issue of Haiti.
Let's try to now wind up. Yes, within the next 5 minutes.